and we're going to go ahead and start our presentation. And I'm going to turn my video off and pass the digital and proverbial mic to Vanessa.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Vanessa Kendall. I am with the Sexual Assault Crisis Center of Eastern Connecticut. I'm a victim advocate and crisis counselor. I primarily work with adult victims and survivors. With the agency, there are three child advocates who specifically work with children, 2 adult advocates, myself, and 1 other person. We then have a college advocate and then outreach coordinator. So I've been with the agency for about 2 years now. I've been working with adults since I started, and I plan to continue working here for quite a while. So I will share the screen to pull up my PowerPoint to go over information about the Sexual Assault Crisis Center. So we primarily have 2 office locations, one in Willimantic, one in New London. Willimantic is our main location. In New London, we meet with clients by appointment only. With the pandemic, we're currently meeting virtually, over the phone, and not in person just yet. We're waiting, for COVID to settle down a little bit and start pulling in clients slowly. So right now we're not meeting any clients in New London, and we'll wait for when we can bring clients into the office. We have a 24-hour confidential hotline service. So this number here provided, this one, the 860-456-2789 is our hotline. We have staff each week rotating on the hotline, and you will always have someone answer, and we typically will answer if a victim or survivor is in distress, if they have questions. We typically also get nurses who call from the hospitals when victims are at the hospital completing what we call a forensic evidence collection exam. And so the nurses will call us to have us go down and meet the victim. Sometimes we also get calls from police officers telling us that they have a victim there at the police station, completing a statement about the assault. So it's a wide variety of calls that we get from the hotline. And then there's the toll-free numbers. So what is the Crisis Center? The Sexual Assault Crisis Center of Eastern Connecticut, also known as SACEC, that's kind of the abbreviation for it. We provide, one second, my screen is cutting off. We provide crisis intervention, advocacy, and counseling for survivors of sexual violence. We provide services to friends and family members. And all of the services that we do provide are free and confidential. We have a confidentiality agreement, and that comes more towards the end, that I'll talk about that. So you don't have to worry about, if we may report to hospital personnel or police personnel. The only time we do report that is when there's a minor involved, because we are mandated reporters, but otherwise everything is confidential. So here's more about our services. Again, 24-hour hotline with immediate access to us. We are trained certified crisis counselors, myself and my coworkers. We provide crisis intervention and short-term counseling. This is typically just on the hotline. Accompaniment and advocacy through medical or police, like at the police stations, and preparation and accompaniment through the court system. So when a victim survivor wants to file a restraining order or a civil protective order. So the civil protective order and restraining order are very similar. The only difference with these are when a civil protective order is when you may not know the perpetrator very well, or the victim doesn't know the perpetrator very well. And the restraining order is more when you do have kind of a past history or relationship with the perpetrator. So that's just the difference when I say those. Services, we offer English and Spanish advocates. We offer support groups for survivors and their families. We have professional trainings, community education, and child sexual abuse prevention programs. A lot of times we reach out to colleges, the libraries as well. And then a lot of elementary schools. We've provided services to youth talking about safe touch and kind of that information. We also do provide information and referral for other needs. This could be counseling services outside of our area, or, you know, possible medical services, things like that. Immediate concerns. So things that we kind of look at is physical safety. We want to make sure that victims and survivors are safe. We want to make sure that their environment is safe. And that's kind of the first thing that we look for. Then we help through evidence collection. We look to help through medical attention, reporting the assault, and counseling. These are kind of the steps that happen through the process of when a victim or survivor contacts us. And I say victim or survivor because each victim and survivor does identify as one of those. So you'll hear me say that a lot. Sexual violence. So this is just a term for sexual violence. Sexual assault is a general term that includes sexual harassment, unwanted sexual contact, child sexual abuse, incest, and rape. Sexual contact becomes assault when a person is unable to or does not consent to an activity. So, you know, if you don't give consent, or the victim may be unconscious and is not able to give consent. Rape, a crime of aggression, power, and control in which one person forces, coerces, or manipulates another person to have sexual intercourse without their consent. Rape includes vaginal, oral, and anal penetration by any object, including digital penetration, and also includes forced oral sex. Victims of sexual assault. They may experience a number of physical, emotional, and behavioral health problems. Each victim may respond differently to an assault depending upon available support systems, the nature of the abuse, and general coping mechanisms. Past trauma history plays a significant role in recovery. It's very true. Victims and survivors respond very differently. It's been proven that when victims are provided the proper and adequate amount of support, that they cope and respond more positively. I know that sounds kind of awkward, but victims need that support, and you know, that's something that we're always willing to give, of course. Long-term effects of sexual assault: self-blame, unwanted pregnancy, depression, eating disorders, suicidal ideations, mood swings, panic attacks, and flashbacks. Also includes nightmares, substance abuse, gastrointestinal symptoms, gynecological symptoms, STIs, PTSD, crisis of faith, difficulty trusting others. And there's many more long-term effects that come from this. Section 52-146, this is that confidentiality agreement that our agency has with any victim, survivor, or family member. So secondary victim. A secondary victim is are those family members, those friends that may reach out to us, either needing services, support, or just looking to help the primary victim report an assault or services that, may be provided. So that's the end of the slideshow, but I do also, we have our Child Advocacy Center as well, and I just want to provide more information on the Child Advocacy Center. So this link right here, this is our webpage. It's just www.sacec.org. And there's a bunch of different links. So if anyone's ever interested, just check out the different tabs here and see what information you may be interested in. I know there's a section where you can actually like send an email or message to our agency. And then we also have the hotline and our phone number. So the Child Advocacy Center, we have 2 locations. We have Wendy's Place and the New London County CAC. Wendy's Place is in Danielson, and then the New London CAC is in New London. So what is a Child Advocacy Center? Child Advocacy Center provides services to children who are suspected victims of physical or sexual abuse through the multidisciplinary team. It's also known as the MDT. So the MDT brings together under one umbrella, and I'll explain this a little bit in a second, all the professionals and agencies needed to offer comprehensive services to children and their families. This includes law enforcement, child protective services, or Department of Children and Families, prosecution, mental health, medical, or victim advocacy. So these MDT members, the reason why the MDT team was created was so that we could all come together as one and figure out what had happened with the sexual assault or this physical abuse, so that the victim didn't have to go to the police station, then go to medical examiners, then go to child protective services, and all explain the assault in these different places, because it's very re-traumatizing for a child. So instead, we all come together on one day, one meeting. Sometimes it could be more than one meeting to discuss together instead of all individually and separately. So we all work together as a team instead. So looking over here, this is where we have our Eastern Region's Children Advocacy Center members. So these are all the different agencies that would be a part of the MDT. So yeah, and that's what that looks like. And then this over here, this is Stephanie Russo. She is the MDT and CAC coordinator. The hotline is still linked with SACEC's hotline. We're still technically the same agency. Anything that is reported to the Child Advocacy Center comes to our office as well. Stephanie works in the same office as us, but they're the same agency, but separate at the same time, if that makes any sense. So yeah, that is what I have for my information.
I love it here so much. Okay, we can get started. You can just skip over the Safe Futures slide. It just says Safe Futures, and go right ahead to me. So hi everyone, my name is Nazmie Ojeda. I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement at Safe Futures. You'll see my information on the screen should you have any questions or decide that you needed to privately contact me or wanted support from our agency. I have been with Safe Futures for 9 years in a few different capacities. And right now I'm working with our prevention department and really getting out in our community in different ways to talk about our services. Next slide. Safe Futures serves 21 towns in southeastern Connecticut, and this is just a snippet of what we did in the year 2020. So we have served 7,000 plus victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and trafficking in Southeastern Connecticut. And we do that through a bunch of different services that we provide. So we have an emergency shelter. We have a few transitional living programs, such as our on-site Phoenix House, which houses 41 individuals, and then some other scattered site programs throughout the Southeastern Connecticut community that housed about 39 individuals in the year 2020. We also have programs that are for folks who have experienced substance misuse and need support around that and have experienced domestic violence. Our prevention programs reach over 5,000 students a year and over 300 educators. And right now we are getting creative, and some of that work is in person, a lot of it is virtual, but we're really trying to reach our young adults and our students and let them know that the work starts with them, right? Next screen. So I just want to take the time to say that this is a really sensitive topic, and we want to make sure that you do what you need to do to take care of yourself. So if that means you take a break and walk away from the screen, make sure that you are on mute for the best connection. And it's okay to have your camera off. And we will make time for questions and comments at the end of the presentation. But I really just want to make sure that if you need time for yourself, that you take it. It's okay. Next slide. So before we get into some of the things that Vanessa talked about, I really wanted to take a moment to talk about domestic violence, right? What is domestic violence? Domestic violence is a pattern of abuse and coercive behaviors that abusers use to control their intimate partners. It is intentional, and it is about power and control. It happens when a person believes that he or she is entitled to control another. And it's really important that we understand that within the parameters of an intimate partner relationship, there can exist sexual assault. So I really wanted to go over what it means. Next slide. Here you can see the power and control wheel, and we understand that it's a pattern, right? So it may start as something really minimal, really small. It's almost like you can't tell that it's happening, right? A lot of our victim survivors say, I didn't know that this was happening to me until I felt like it was too late, or I didn't think anybody would believe me because it was just words at first, or it was emotional, it wasn't physical. And so again, I want you all to understand that it's about power and control. It's about one individual trying to exert power and control over another. And it starts really small and builds over time. And domestic violence is also sexual violence and can be sexual violence. Next slide. So I think what does all of that have to do with our talk today, right? I think the one thing I want you all to take away from this chat is consent, right? What is consent? I know Vanessa mentioned it earlier. Consent is specifically agreeing by choice to sexual activity when you have the freedom and capacity to make that choice, right? So if you're sleeping, if you are under the influence, if you have taken any medication, if for any reason you cannot say yes, or you cannot say no, you cannot give consent. Next slide. So why is it important to talk about consent within an intimate partner relationship? I think it's important because we have to know that if you have said yes before, that does not mean that you have to say yes every time. That's a misconception, right? Talking about consent or getting consent won't make things awkward. It won't ruin the mood. It won't make you the bad guy. It's about having a conversation with your partner. It's about establishing boundaries and about talking about the things that you may feel comfortable with in the moment, and you can always change your mind. Consent is not assumed, implied, coerced, or convinced. And if at any moment you feel like that's what is happening, you can say no. Next slide. This is one of my favorite ways to remember consent. And who doesn't love French fries, right? So consent is freely given, reversible. Again, just because you said yes does not mean you can't change your mind. It's informed, enthusiastic, and specific. I remember when I first came across this graphic, I laughed to myself a little bit and I thought, enthusiastic. I don't mean that you're going to say yes right away. Enthusiasm is different for any person. The point to that word, I think, is that you feel comfortable, you feel safe, and you can articulate your needs as far as whatever it is that you're engaging in, whether it's, come here, I'd really like for you to sit next to me. Is it okay if I put my hand on your knee? Can I give you a hug? Is it okay to shake hands? We have to remember, again, consent is freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, whatever that looks like for you, and specific. Next slide. I'm sorry, that is the end of my slides, but I also wanted to take the time to go over one of the most, I think, asked questions. Vanessa, I know we discussed this a little bit in our chat earlier, and I wanted to take the time to make space for it. So I didn't know if you wanted to jump into questions now, or if we wanted to get into, what to do if somebody discloses to you, and where to go from there.
I think it'd be great to go with the what to do if someone discloses to you, so that gets in the recording, and then we'll do questions afterwards and keep the recorded content all together.
Perfect. I am looking for my document. I'm so sorry. When I shut off my computer, it closed. Give me 1 second. Vanessa, do you want to jump in and talk about your recommendations as an advocate on what to do if somebody discloses?
Yeah. So what to do if somebody discloses? So there's many different ways that this can be taken. So my first recommendation or suggestion is if a victim or survivor comes to you asking or telling you about the assault and then doesn't really know what to do, the first and most important thing is to prioritize their wants and needs. Is it okay that you do contact someone or an agency to figure out what can be done? So ask if they're okay, support them. What can you do to help them? What can you do to make them feel comfortable? Do they feel like they're in a safe environment? Those are like the first aspects to cover. Then, if you contact our agency, there's many different ways that this can be taken. It depends. So if the victim does want medical attention, they have up to 5 days after the sexual assault to receive medical attention, complete the forensic evidence collection exam. This exam can take up to 4 to 6 hours. A victim advocate does come and accompany the victim if the victim does wish to have an advocate. Other questions that may be asked is if the victim does want to report, do they wish to seek counseling services? And then also one thing, I just lost, it was on the top of my head. When the victim wishes to complete an exam, they have up to 5 years to decide whether or not they want to report to the police and open up a case that can potentially go to court and proceed in the perpetrator being charged. Those are kind of my best recommendations and suggestions. And Nazmie, you can bounce in if I forgot anything.
Sure. So I think the first thing that I'd like to do on a personal note is share with everyone that I am a survivor and I identify as a survivor. And part of my passion for my work and my drive is to create spaces and opportunity for everyone in my community to become an advocate. I like to say that as an educator and as a facilitator, I want to make advocates throughout my community. And so how can you be an ally? How can you be helpful? All the things that Vanessa said are really important. And so some of the things that I want to encourage you all is to remember, first, it is incredibly hard for somebody to decide to share something that is very private. It's a lot of times folks feel shame and guilt. They blame themselves, right? And in my experience as a survivor of childhood sexual assault, I remember thinking that I had to protect the people that I was sharing my story with because they didn't know what to do with what I had to say. So some of the things that I like to tell folks is, first, remember your body language, okay? Acknowledge that you're listening, show them with your body. People can tell when somebody is uncomfortable, and it's okay to have a natural response, but remember that the person sharing this story with you is paying attention to you as well. Small expressions like, I'm listening, I'm here, really help to guide the person and to make them feel comfortable. Try relaxing your posture. Thank them. Say, thank you for telling me this. Thank you for trusting me with your story. I'm really glad that you told me. Thank you for trusting me, are some of the things that could be helpful for the person disclosing to hear. Show that you're listening. So I'm here if you want to talk anytime. If this is too much right now, we can talk another time. I know that this is rough and maybe I can't directly help you, but I can try to find somebody who can. And then it's really important that you reassure them that you still feel the same way about them. Whether you're a friend, a family member, a partner, I can tell that this was really hard for you to share with me, and I want you to know that I am in no way judging you or feel different about you. I love you. I care about you. I want to be there for you. This doesn't change our relationship, are some of the things that you can say. And then when you don't know what to do, ask. How can I support you? Do you want me to just listen right now? Do you want to report to the police? Do you want to find someone to talk to about this? What feels really helpful right now? And if none of that works, refer to us, right? So we just gave you some information for 2 agencies that are in Southeastern Connecticut that can help through a hotline, through in-person support, and with advocates who know what they're doing and who do this work every single day. So those are some of the things that I recommend. So again, remember your body language. Express to them that you're grateful or thankful that they have trusted you with this information and have made space for you to listen. And then listen and reassure them that you're here to support and not judge, and to help them find the best resources possible for whatever help that they need. In no way does that mean that we are ever going to pressure somebody to report or to talk to somebody else. Maybe all they were ready for in the moment was just to talk to you. That's what I got.
Absolutely.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Well, I know I had a couple questions. On the presentation that you gave about the different types of violence, one of them was digital penetration. And I was wondering if you could define what that is.
So let me pull up a more specific definition. It is
while you look for that, sorry, I was going to say, while you look for that, I think that making the time to talk about, stalking or harassing or any kind of like sexual coercion online, it's something that is very real. And I would say with the times right now. So it's really important that young or old, we understand that it's real, it's happening, and there are ways to be safe, even virtually. And it's important that we are still asking for and giving consent virtually.
Absolutely. So I just pulled up the definition here. Digital penetration isn't what it seems. It seems more like digital, like electronic, or But it is more objects on your body, fingers, hands, toes, that sort of thing.
The digits. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So it's funny, I had another question, but then after Nazmie mentioned the digital context of it, do you find that a lot of that is increasing with the digital dating apps, and that the opportunity for that level of domestic violence has increased? Or
I mean, domestic violence, our services are through the roof right now because folks can't leave home, right? And so a lot of the spaces that were used to escape now are, we can't go. But I also want to point out that for young people specifically, some of their very first sexual interactions and experiences happen virtually, even before COVID. Right? There's a whole world online of connectivity that we often miss out talking on, right? And so I encourage our young people to think about their relationships in a healthy way as far as boundary setting is concerned, when they are, following each other on, let's say, Snapchat, or constantly disclosing their location on Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media outlet they are using to express themselves, to share themselves with their friends and family, to really think about how they're considering their boundaries and their bodies virtually. All of that is really important. And stalking can start that way, right? It could be a partner saying, hey, I really miss you. I just want to know where you are. And it sounds really sweet and exciting. And so you start to share your location. And then one day you decide maybe you don't want to do that. And they say, no, I want you to do it all the time. So again, the things that start off as feeling really exciting and romantic are sometimes the ways to see those red flags, right? Mm-hmm. And so we encourage our young people to consider boundary setting and having those conversations, again, around consent and what they feel comfortable with, even while using social media platforms, email, any form of connection. It's important to talk about the things you're comfortable with and the things that you're not comfortable with. And again, just because you said yes once does not mean that you have to keep saying yes. So if you sent a picture, if a graphic, if you wrote a particular type of text, if you engaged in a specific type of conversation, that does not mean you have to continue doing it if you no longer feel comfortable or safe.
Thank you. Yeah. My other question, speaking of youth, was at what point, especially with the child advocacy centers, at what point are you no longer a child for that kind of support?
You mean like with the forensic interviewing for the child advocacy center?
When you hit the teenage years, you're not like a kid, but what?
Typically 18 years old. We do have some cases, typically with those who have disabilities. We will sometimes still incorporate them with the child advocacy center.
You said 18, right?
18, yep.
Okay, sorry.
Yep. And we go as young as, I think 4 or 5. That tends to be a little tricky because it's hard to have a child understand what it is that is happening. But we try to work the best as we can with even younger. So yeah.
It's a scary thought, even younger.
Yeah. Very scary. Yeah.
So as two people who work with some really heavy, scary stuff, what are your recommendations for being able to process and talk about this, but then also keep your own mental health in check?
I'm involved with fitness, any sort of fitness for myself. So I recommend that for, anyone who, is struggling with anxiety. Any sort of physical activity is really encouraging and helpful. But that's what I do for my own self-care. And I know a lot of clients that I work with have really benefited from that as well. Just physical activity.
That's a great question. I would say for me, it's a twofold experience. As a provider and a director, it's really important that I'm constantly checking in with my staff and making sure that they are not taking work home. And that's incredibly difficult. It took me years to get to a point where I felt like I wasn't taking work home or I wasn't bringing clients home, because their stories and what was going on weighed so heavy with me. So I think checking in and being honest is the first thing that you want to do. And then after checking in, you want to ask yourself, what is it that you need? Do I need a break? Do I need to take time off? Do I need to talk to someone? I'm a huge advocate for therapy within the workspace and within a personal space. So those are some of the things I would do as a provider. As a survivor, it's been super important to me to check in with my body. And so like Vanessa, I also am really into meditation. Yoga is my thing. I read a lot, and I have been recently really learning to not over self-care, if that makes sense. I think we got into a huge self-care buzz, and for a little bit I was overwhelmed with not giving myself enough self-care, and then feeling guilty, and then feeling like I'm not relaxing enough, but relaxing became taxing. I'm not trying to be corny, but it's true. So really just giving yourself time to breathe. And to check in with myself. Checking in with myself is really important. And I like to ask myself, like, Nazmie, what are you feeding yourself? And it's not just always what you eat, right? Like, what am I reading? What am I watching? What conversations am I engaging in? And really noticing the things that make me feel good and the things that might trigger me. And so sometimes that means having to stop certain things for a little bit and redirect my energy, my focus, so that I can get back to feeling healthy. And I think it's also really important for survivors to know that healing is not a linear process, right? There are days that I wake up and I feel really great. And then there are days where I feel like I don't know if I'm going to have a flashback, or if I'm going to not feel sad or not feel alone. But those are all misconceptions and myths, right? Those are feelings perpetuated by anxiety and by sadness and by things that I think that I mitigate through my exercise and my meditation and things like that. But they're all normal, natural feelings, right? And so I have to make space for the bad and the good all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't have any other questions in the moment, but I absolutely know how to reach out to you guys because of this presentation. Thank you. I'm not sure if I think I got a little bit caught up in the tech glitches, but at some point it's, and just important to note that this isn't just a female issue, right? It's not just a girl's thing, a women's thing, no. That men and boys experience domestic and sexual violence, and we're here for them too, no matter how you identify. And that's also true for our LGBTQ community. It's really important to me that we emphasize that, Safe Futures and Vanessa's agency, we're both here to serve our communities across the board, right? Male, female, black, white, purple, blue. It's really important that that you all know we're here for any person, however they identify, whatever gender. And this can happen to anyone, right? Sexual assault and domestic violence does not discriminate. So I really think that should be highlighted.
Agreed, absolutely.
That reminds me of the last question that I had. So if someone can't think of who to contact, and if they were to call 211, would 211 refer them to you guys? Yes?
Either one of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And then from there, if it's not the right agency, then we always connect with each other, or yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And we've also, I also would like to add that Safe Futures has supported families or individuals who are feeling like they're not safe in their community as a result of sexual assault. So our emergency shelter is primarily known for victims who are fleeing domestic violence and are actively in crisis, but we have also housed and sheltered folks who have identified as, I don't want to say just having been sexually assaulted, because I think, domestic and sexual violence intersect. But we have housed families where, like, let's say we had a young man a couple years ago who disclosed to his mother, and she didn't know where to go or had any place to go. And we provided shelter, emergency shelter. So that's another thing that we can do. And if we don't have the space, we look for space or support throughout the state in our 17 other sister programs under the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, our agency doesn't provide shelter. So if we do have sexual assault victims who need shelter, we then refer to Safe Futures.
Right.
I love the relationship between you guys. The connection. Networking. All right. Well, I don't know if you guys want to give a specific wrap-up statement each, and then I'll stop the recording and end the session.
I mean, thank you for coming and participating. I'm always here. My agency is always here to support victims, secondary victims, and we are a safe space.
Yeah, I'd like to say the same thing. Thank you for your time, for listening, for tuning in. Safe Futures is an agency that prides itself in listening, in being present, and in believing. So it doesn't matter who, what, when, where, or why. What matters is that you've contacted us and that we are here to help and to guide in the best way possible. And again, if you know someone, and I can guarantee, right, that you know someone that needs our support and you don't know what to do or you don't know what to say, give us a call, go on our websites, and we will help build resources or direct you in the best way possible. Thank you.